about foundations and perspectives. And if you will take the foundations and perspectives and now begin to build your ministry, I'm going to give you ideas that work for us within the foundations that I've given you. However, I wouldn't want you to limit it to what I'm saying, but certainly steal anything I tell you and take it home and expand it and tell me how great you've made it. So that would be awesome for me. But in our conversation earlier today, we talked about that person that comes to the kitchen, comes to your house, and they come to your house, and you keep telling them, no, open the refrigerator. But you notice they never do. They never do. And you have to make it so that, first of all, well, let me give you this. In our church, one of our discipleship piece is the word team. Train, equip, authorize, and mobilize. When we get to the authorize part, we know that we have to authorize them in the Word. We've just spent a whole morning talking about how to authorize people by authorizing ourselves to say, follow me, by giving them the core foundations of your church and of the Word that are not negotiable. These are not negotiable, that somebody treats another person with honor. That's not negotiable. That's the way we are, and we're going to call out on it if it doesn't happen. So that's a part of the authorization. So when I invite somebody into my home and I authorize them to get in the refrigerator, how many of you know that doesn't mean they will? Isn't that right? So what I've found in church life, even though I've authorized them to open the church refrigerator, so to speak, open the cupboards of the church, I've authorized them, I've invited them, I've said, follow me. I have told them numerous times that I really want you to be part of the team. I have talked to them, I've recruited them, but I can't get them to come into the process. Sometimes we are systemically broken. And we have systems that are hurting us, or systems that don't exist that should exist, because the person doesn't know. Like I said earlier today, well, if that person isn't getting it, then I'm going to pull all the goods out and I'm going to put them on the counter. So even, the snacks I want them to eat, well, I don't want them to be limited to that, but I'm going to at least give them a sampling on the counter so that they can say, oh, wait a minute, she's serious. She wants me to eat that caramel corn that she put out. Okay, that's good. She's shown me 1,000,000 times where the milk is so that I can get a cup of coffee and get cream and sugar and whatever. But again, you have to help people, because by nature, people won't impose. And so they see the church, especially if you're the pastor or a core leader of the church, they see the church as your terrain, your kingdom. We know it's ours. We know it belongs to the kingdom of God, but they're walking in and they don't quite get that. So systemically, we're broken or non-existent in our systems. And our systems really need to speak loudly what we're saying. And I think sometimes that we have a good heart. We have a very, very good heart, but we don't often have the system set up so that the people can see it and the people know to be able to get in that kitchen cupboard, if you will, of your church. They don't really know how to do this. And I can tell you from experience that you have to keep this ever before you. It's not like just because you got it well with one guest in your home that the next guest is just automatically, well, that worked when I brought these people in, so that must going to be work for this next people. Maybe not. Maybe you just have to keep reapproaching it. So I don't mean to wear you out with it, but the truth is, if you don't approach your systems and the way your practices are, then you will have a problem getting across the very heart of what you felt you connected to this morning in our earlier session. Because I could see your faces. You were connecting to what I was saying. This was exciting to you when you heard it. But I can tell you, if we miss this piece right here and we don't put the practical to it and put some legs to it, it won't walk for you. Okay? So that's what we're going to try to do this afternoon. Recruitment is something we want to talk about. So recruitment, I said, follow me. I gave you the scripture. I hope I've encouraged your heart. I hope Foundationally, in the scripture, you can see that I gave you the foundation. This is Jesus' plan to be excited about our church. But let me give you for instance, an acronym we use in our church. I just gave you the TEAM acronym: Train, Equip, Authorize, Mobilize. That's our acronym, and that's what we use for discipleship. However, on evangelism, we use this acronym: LIFE, Living Examples, Inspiring Invitation, Focused on Friends, Family, and Community, and Extending Wholeness. LIFE, Living Example, Inspiring Invitation, Focused on Friends, Family, and Community, and Extending Wholeness. Well, our evangelism piece doesn't necessarily have anything to do with this, except for when I get to that when I get to the inspiring invitation. I want to ask you, when you are recruiting somebody to your church or to your team, are you an inspiring invitation? Because what we found out is that we have amazing graphic designer. She actually lives here and attends the Rock now, but she's still part of our design team. And she was one of the pastors on our team, and we share her now with this Southern California. But she made amazing, and still makes amazing, graphic design for us, and provides for us awesome invitations. But if I have this awesome invitation, and this be my invitation, and I hand it to you with a sour face, or I slip it around and don't really talk to you about it, it's just a piece of paper. And I really want to say to you that when you're inviting somebody to your church, this will work in inviting people to your church, which, by the way, the first step of getting a team member is you might have a team member that's sitting in your community that doesn't know the Lord. And you can invite them to your church, and before you know it, you've got them on team, right? So don't remember where Jesus looked outside, and he looked at that tax collector. So you can look at any person you want, but you've got to find a way to recruit them. Now, maybe for me, I am socially, and maybe my mindset is somewhat hardwired this way. So maybe it's, for some might think, well, it's easier for you. It's still an exercise for me to walk across the room and invite. I don't care how outgoing you might be, it's still an exercise. So for instance, in my evangelism piece, which again, we're not talking about evangelism, but this will work for you to understand, because evangelism is recruitment, isn't it? You're recruiting them to your team, right? So I work off of what I call a one-a-day principle, and I try really hard one time a day, and this came from, I'm old enough to say the one-a-day vitamins. I watched those vitamin commercials when I was young. And just take one a day and you'll be all good. And so this principle came off. One a day, I try to walk across the room to a perfect stranger and ask them, hey, I'm a Christian, and I love to pray for somebody different every day, and I was wondering if you have any kind of prayer need that I could pray for you. You would not believe the conversations I get myself into, because I walked across the room, so to speak. But sometimes even in our church, where I would know you, but I wouldn't walk across the room to invite you. In our team, we didn't walk across the room. We didn't take the physical step. Recruitment means that you physically are going to take the step to do this thing. You have to find a way outside of, even if you are by nature an introverted person. If you're a team leader, get over yourself, get over your introverted thought process, and walk across the room. You have to be able to say, follow me, and find a way to do that. And you have to be that inspiring invitation. Because again, if I hand you, oh, well, we're having a team meeting on Sunday night, 6 o'clock, hope you can make it. I'm not inspiring you. But what if I said, Carolyn, I am having a team meeting. It is so exciting. And listen to me. I really am hoping you can be there. And listen, I close the deal. So will you be able to be there? And before she knows it, she has to answer me, because I didn't leave her an option. I'm asking her. Sometimes I say to a person, so shall I call you on Tuesday, or will Wednesday be better? Do you see what I'm saying? I didn't say, shall I call you? I gave them, I'm calling you on Tuesday or Wednesday. Which one's going to work for you? A little bit of an option for them. But the idea is that I am bringing them into my world. What are you doing to bring people into your world? You have to physically do this, walking across the room, opening your mouth, speaking to them. Even if your systems are poor, if you don't physically speak to somebody and begin to talk to them about what you're doing, share the vision about it, and recruit them and reach out to people personally. You have to, number one thing is you have to reach out to people personally. If you're taking notes, you want to write that down. Reach out to people personally. So it doesn't do any good if you don't make the reach out. An example of this is I had started the Essential Conferences for Women, and the Holy Spirit spoke to me the very first year, I want you to include this woman on the team. I passed by this woman in the conference, and it was a lot of people there, and I spoke to her and said, hey, I'd like to connect with you. I did do the reach out personally, right? But how many of you know she didn't pick up the phone later and call me and say, hey, remember you said you'd like to connect with me? A year goes by. A year and a half goes by. Then I get the call from the Holy Spirit. Hello? Do you remember that I told you I wanted this woman on your team? Uh-huh. Now I'm in trouble with the Holy Spirit. Guess what I did? I picked up the phone and I reached out to her personally. Could she have done it? Because I opened the door. I said, hey, I'd like to connect with you. Wasn't that good enough? It wasn't good enough. She's now on the team, by the way. So listen to me. You have to reach out to people personally and be clear about what you're saying. Second thing is recruit people with specific talents. It's okay to recruit everybody, but sometimes it comes down to a place on your team that you need some people with specific talents. Recruit them. Invite them. Tell them, I want you on my team because of your talent, because of your gifting. I would like you to be on this team to help with this area. That makes it very clear for them. Okay, they see my administrative skill. They see my creative capability. They see that I'm able to do this. And specific talent that somebody has, sometimes you are looking for that, but you're not recruiting that. And you're wondering why your team is not being successful. So I suggest to you that part of your follow me is to look for people that the Holy Spirit has already identified for you in the Spirit that need to be on the team. So if you have a team and your team needs an administrator, begin to look for people with administrative gifting and ask them, would you come on my team? An example of this. We had a need in our church. I already told you earlier about our administrative operations staff member, our leader for church operations. We had a need to begin to staff her team. And I said, Lord, we need a few more administrative people to help. We approached a woman in our church and said, I am wondering, we've noticed that you have some administrative giftings. Would you consider volunteering at the church 2 days, full days a week? You know this woman, she comes now 2 full days a week. She doesn't like our computers because our volunteer computers, we haven't been able to afford a Mac yet. So what she does is she has this huge screen computer, Mac, a big one. That's what she owns for home. She puts it on wheels every Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. She's at our church, and she rolls in her big computer, sits it up there, and sits all day long and works on our team. Why? Because we said we have some need for administrative help. We specifically went after what her talents and giftings are. So when you ask them, I have to tell you, I have more yeses than I have nos. And my idea of a no is no big deal. If I ask somebody and they say no, all I figure is I'm that much closer to the person that's going to say yes. I don't take that as a defeat. I'm like, okay, it might take me 10 no's before I get to that yes, but that yes is going to be one big wow of a yes. So I encourage you, recruit people with specific talents if you need specific talent. Don't sit there and say, I don't have, I don't have. We should never say we don't have in the kingdom of God, because that's not part of our core value of who we are. We always have. Sometimes we have not because we did not ask. Then give people opportunities for different levels of involvement. As you recruit people, for instance, if you come on our team at our church, there is a staff involvement, and we're very careful about who we ask to come on staff. Again, we're not paying these people to be on staff, but we're treating them like they are staff members, paid staff members. They give us their vacation schedules. I'm telling you, it's the whole enchilada. And I want to encourage you, especially if you are watching this video and you have small church, if you're here in this room and you have a small church, do not think that you can't have a team because you have a small church and you can't pay them. People will give their life for something that's important. And the ministry is important. It's important. So, but give people opportunities for different levels of involvement. So in our church, we may ask a volunteer to come in, and they're on volunteer level, which is not the same as staff level. We have a requirement for a staff level that is way up, and the expectation for a staff level is different than we have for a volunteer. So when the volunteer, and again, we are expecting something great out of the volunteer, but there is a different expectation out of the staff. Does that make sense to you? Give people a different level of involvement. Don't expect everyone is going to have the same ability to involve or connect at the same level. So if you have different levels of involvement on your team, then you're going to get where you need to get faster. So invite people at different levels. There's always an entry level, and then there's always a greater level. Now, when you are thinking about communications and recruitment specifically, I want you to think of a communication piece as the lowest level of communication. Any kind of video you do, email, social media, and we are big on this. We are really big on this. If you were to go into the Grace North Facebook world, you would get sucked in because we have a team that is just like, they're out there. They're really doing their job. Okay, so they're on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and they're helping with our weekly communique, which goes by email, and they're thinking this thing through where it's going to go. As good as that is, it's the lowest level of communication. Hi, my name is Marianne. I would like to ask you, can I have 5 minutes of your time? Because I would like you to be on my team. That's the highest level of communication. If you don't do this right here, pick up the phone, walk across the room, you are using only the lowest level of communication. Even Jesus, when he recruited them, see, Jesus didn't have to resort, he didn't have Facebook to resort to. He walked up to them and said, follow me. It was a personal invitation. So let's realize that all of these tools we have, sometimes we count on them. As a matter of fact, we have problems with Facebook right now where people are posting things on Facebook and then they're mad at the pastor because the pastor, what, you didn't know that I had been sick? Well, how was I supposed to know? Well, because I posted on Facebook. So again, that's the lowest level of communication. And you want to teach your team that as well. Now, I'm not saying you don't use those tools. I use those tools. For instance, I use a private group on Facebook. How many of you are familiar with private group on Facebook? It's a very helpful tool. Because you can take a team and you can use the private group on Facebook. But again, if your team isn't all connected to it, again, you can't count on that being the only form of communication. But I'm talking about recruiting. Sometimes we recruit like this. We post it on Facebook. I actually had one of our members of our church. They posted on Facebook. They were moving into our community, and they knew a lot of the people. And they posted on Facebook, we're moving, and the trucks are being unloaded tomorrow at 9 a.m. They just posted this one day in advance. How many of you think they had a big showing? They didn't, did they? But if they had picked up and called, they would have had a good showing of people, because our people are very loving and kind. But they didn't, and it wasn't even that they didn't see it. You want to know the truth? They didn't feel responsible to it. They didn't feel it was, well, somebody else will get that. So if you post on Facebook, I'm recruiting a team to go out in the parks and sing, you're probably not going to get too many people. But if you call the musicians and the singers, which we just did just recently, we have an evangelistic outreach team that goes into parks and into the community, into the malls, and they sing, and they're an unplugged group, and all they have is just a couple of little boxes, and they play the banjo and the guitar and a little bit of drum, and boy, they just get crowds will follow them. But the person that was building that team did not expect a Facebook post to be that. He picked up the phone, or he walked across the church, and he said, I saw that you have a drumming capability. Would you like to be on an evangelism team for music? I see that you have a vocal capability. By the way, they didn't invite me on this team. I don't know why. I'm a really good singer. No. Listen, they went after people with specific talents because they had a need, right? So they asked them. So let's move over to training. Does that help you with the idea of recruitment? Because if you don't break it down to things like I just said, reach out to people personally, recruit people with specific talents, giving them opportunity when you're recruiting them for different levels of involvement, and remembering that communication is your lowest level of communication, written or verbal. You personally asking them is the highest level. Let's talk about training. When you're talking about training the team and training the team leader, both people have to be trained. So if you're a pastor or a leader in charge of the greater portion of the church, and you're wanting to put a team together, but you're not going to be the team leader, the first person you have to do is train the team leader, right? You have to work with that team leader, set goals, set measurable goals with the team leader, and help them to know what it is you're expecting. Because every time I've ever done this without going through this process, that team struggles because the team leader didn't even know what was expected. It wasn't clear, and it wasn't clearly defined. So when you begin to train a team leader, you're beginning, first of all, when you're training team leaders, remember you're always training team leaders because you're walking around your world with these people, and you're giving them the core values, and you're constantly training, and pretty soon you have somebody that you go, that person can lead a team. Now, the first thing you have to do is recruit that team leader. So you've got to recruit the team leader, and then you have to sit down with the team leader and help them write measurable goals, help them understand what it is you've just recruited them to. Now, you have to begin to train the team. The questions you have to ask yourself is, what do they need to know? What does the team need to know? Otherwise, are you training them on the wrong things? I told you earlier about our music, School of Music. They needed to know how to play an instrument, and they didn't know how, so we taught them. Now they are some of our best musicians in our church. Okay? We simply said, well, we've got people that like music, but they don't know how to play music, so we're going to teach them how to play music because we need some music, right? So we're going to teach them that. We have people that need, that are talented in administrative, they're hardwired that way, but maybe they don't know how to use our data system. So do we just throw them on that data system and say, so we have to ask ourselves, what do they need to know? Because otherwise you're going to find, remember earlier I talked about the woman that was sitting in the room crying? Part and parcel is because I never trained her. I just said, here, go do that. I didn't really explain to her what the goals were. I didn't explain to her how I wanted it done. So every week she was coming frustrated, completely frustrated with the idea that she didn't even know what was expected. So when you're talking about training people, ask yourself, what do they need to know? Now, we're taking advantage of the wonderful opportunity that we have with media, and we've created what we call Grace North Online University, so that our training is not another meeting for them to have to go to. Because you know how it is that, okay, I want you to know everything because I want to be diligent. So we've now all of a sudden got all these trainings that everybody has to go to, and they all, well, you have to go to 10 trainings before you can get in and serve. Well, that creates a problem. You can see that. So I would encourage you to take advantage of as much as you can in training. If you can produce it in a way so that the training is, number one, the same. This is one thing we really like about training online, is it's the same. So right now we're just finishing up and working on our team orientation that is significant for everyone in our church to complete. So because the orientation has been different for every person. So you can imagine a person coming in to the church and, well, I want to work with your church, but I really, truly didn't know where you even keep the paper, so how can you expect me to help you with copying? I don't know where it is. I didn't know how to turn in a receipt. Do you see what I'm saying? So what do they need to know, and what's specific that everyone needs to know? Is there some things that are common to all the ministries, and then are there some things that are common only to that ministry? So would it make sense to take the entire church through everything that worship team member needs to know? No. I have never even gone through all that training. Do we have training for worship team members? Absolutely. And it's consistent, and they get it, and they understand it. But there are some training that every worship team member and every child caregiver and every person that works in the cafe or in our experience team, which includes cafe and ushering and greeting and information desk, every person throughout the entire church must know these things. They're common to everybody. So if you could do that, then wouldn't that be better than every single one of your departments creating their own orientation? Wouldn't it be better if you could couple up some of those trainings and ask yourself, is there common training that everybody in the church needs to know? And then is there specific training that must happen if you're going to be on this team? Including something small. So you ask a person to be on your team, and you've asked them to go to the store for you, and their job is to go to Costco and do the shopping. What do they need to know? They need to know, in our church, they would need to know that we don't really like anybody to go to Costco alone. What? I can do that faster by myself. Really? But that's missing a core value that we have, is that when two go together, then life happens. And the ministry that happens between the drive, 30-minute drive, 20-minute drive back and forth, each way, and the sharing of the load of ministry, we think there's something that happens there. Okay, so that's the first thing they need to know, is that part of our core with every ministry is that it's not that you can't go to Costco alone, but that we just think it's better if you don't. We think it's better if you take somebody with you. Even if you take a teenager from our church with you and spend a half an afternoon with them, and they're helping you with your baby in the cart while you're talking with them and maybe stopping and buying them a soda along the way. Do you see what I'm saying? All of a sudden, your trip to Costco was helping to mentor and disciple someone else or building community with somebody. That's something they need to know across the board in our church. That's a core value to Grace North. Maybe not to you, but to us it is. So that's a general thing everybody needs to know. Oh, well, if they're going to shop, they need to know how to pay for it, right? How frustrating is it if somebody goes, okay, they asked me to shop, but nobody explained. Do I turn in this, or are they asking me to pay for it all? Is that what they're asking? Did they ask me because, we make a sizable income and they're expecting me? These questions are real questions. They need to know the answer. That's part of training, is answering simple questions for people. What do I do with the groceries or the items when I bring them back to the church? Do I drop them in the front of the church? Is there a place that I'm supposed to load them? Is there going to be any young men to help me because I'm a young mom and I'm pregnant with my second child and I have a little baby in the car? I'm willing to go do the shopping, but did my team leader think about this and answer some of these questions? For instance, we have a young mom with 4 children, and we've trained her well. She just took over our cleaning of our new campus. And I have been on the communication level, constantly answering questions for her so that she knows what she can do and what she can't do, what's expected and what's not expected. Because I don't want her to be frustrated, right? The last thing in the world any pastor or leader really wants to do is frustrate people. But when you don't answer the questions because you didn't even think the question existed, you didn't provide them training. You didn't answer the questions that they really needed to know. You ask somebody to come on your decorating team, and you say to them, well, we're going to have black tablecloths on all the tables. Really? Do I buy those? Where do I get those tablecloths? Is there any kind of system that will help me to know what I need to know? So we have an actual decorating team at our church, and they know exactly where to get those tablecloths. They know how to check them in and check them out. They know exactly what our system is. But a new person coming in does not know that. They need to be trained on where these tools are and what you do with them. Does that make sense? So what do I do with the tablecloths when the evening is over? Was I responsible to wash them? Because I'm actually thinking I'm leaving the meeting right after it's over. I didn't realize I was, and then the team leader's all mad. The team leader's going, I can't believe it. I asked her to take care of the tablecloths. I can't believe it. She got them out of the cupboard, she placed them on the tables, and after the meeting, she walked away. Did she not understand that the tablecloths were her full responsibility? No, she did not. Whose fault is that? It's not her fault. It's my fault. That I didn't tell her. Does that make sense? I think training is a big deal, and I think we overemphasize, like we take training to this high level, like there's some mysterious thing, and we don't break it down to easy answering questions that they need to know in the field. They have to know the answers to these questions, okay? And they have to know, for instance, when you're training your ushers, do you have a system to train them how they need to count the funds and what they are to do with them when they're done? Otherwise, if you don't, then what's going to happen is your usher person is going to take the offering, receive the offering, and they're going to go into the back room and they maybe count it by themselves with good nature in mind. Isn't that unacceptable to all of us that know anything? But it wouldn't have been to them. They might not have thought that, of course, I would never do anything. No. We don't ever do that. What do they do with it when they're done? Is there somebody signing off on that? They have to be trained. That's training specific. Does our worship team know how to count the offering and what the steps are for the offering? It's not necessary. They don't need to know that information. So there are trainings that are specific to each area of ministry, and if you don't ask yourself what it is, you won't train them in the right ways. So you have to almost think of that the training they need has to do with if you didn't know anything, go through this thing and say, if I know nothing, what would I need to know to be able to do this job? And sometimes the best person to ask is a person that knows nothing because we assume so much because we're around it all the time. And so we need to make sure. And then debrief. In training, debrief after you have an event. Debrief after your team goal has been met and you debrief. And guess what you'll find out in debriefing is what you need to train the next team on. You will find out, oh, I see, we kind of missed that area. So if you want to know what you need to train them in, well, then you will find out what you need to train them in if you will debrief on some things. You may find adjustments to your ministry, but you'll also find some training things. Oh, I didn't realize that we had missed. And don't beat yourself up about it. Just add the training to the next one, right? So begin to add those trainings. So training is a big deal. And then the last thing about training is who do they need to know? Who do they need to know? Example, this woman or man that is going to go to Costco for us, do they need to know our bookkeeper? Because they're going to work very closely with the bookkeeper. Do they even know where the bookkeeper's desk is? Well, here at The Rock, this is a pretty big place, so it might be really important that they know where the financial office is, right? Grace North is not as big as this, but still, would they know that Sandy's desk is around the corner in the discipleship building, hiding in a little corner so that she has some privacy? Would they know that? Why would they know that? They wouldn't know that. Would they know where the safe is when they were done with what they needed to do and drop it in the safe? If we don't tell them that, they won't know that. So you not only need to tell them what to do, but you have to introduce them to the people they need to know. Because otherwise, for instance, we have team members that will all the time, this happens all the time, because social media moves this fast, right? So it moves really fast. So we have team members that will start to post things on social media as if it's an official thing from the church. And our social media guy is right on top of it and says, hey, my name is so-and-so. I need to introduce myself to you because I'd like you to go through this process to do that so that it's more effective. Do you see what I'm saying? Sometimes they just need to know who to talk to. So don't just think about what to train them or how to do it, but who do they need to know? Who do they need to know on your team? Now, let's talk about placement. I'm going to tell you this story. Some years ago, this is when this really came to light for me, is that actually, I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. I'm going to talk to you because really the story has to do with application. So I'm going to talk to you about application in a minute. Let's talk about placement. How a team member is placed in is important. I think that what we make the mistake in is we think that, well, everybody should be able to do everything because we're all committed to God. Well, yes and no. Everybody should be able to do everything because we're committed to God. But for long seasons and the long haul, we want to place people, as we were discussing this morning, within an area that makes sense for their gifting and their calling. And sometimes we think we go after the area of ministry instead of the gift in the person first. Example, wouldn't it be true that both children's ministry and men's ministry need administrative help? Two different passions, two different focuses, right? But couldn't an administrator who's impassioned by administration fit in either one of those ministries? So sometimes we ask the person the question, what do you like the most? You like men's ministry or children's ministry? Maybe the question was posed wrong in placement. How do you think? Do you think like a server or do you think like an administrator? And help them to understand, because then you can say, gee, as a server, I have these functions, these roles available within these different teams, and you could really work here. Then they might say, but I'm passionate about children. Wonderful. Then let me help you meet the family pastor of our church so that you can get involved in serving. And now let me also explain to the family pastor that your passion is not administration, but it's serving. Because there's a different perspective there, right? A person that has serving that rolls out of their being is different than a person that has administration that rolls out of their being, right? So a person that's hardwired or gifted with the Romans 12 administrative gift would be placed differently than a person that has the gift of service. Isn't that right? And so, but sometimes we're trying to place them all the same because we want to fill a spot. And that's all good and well. And this is what I say. In my house, when the trash needs to be taken out or the laundry needs to get done, we all, who really likes to do that? That's not like the favorite job. I don't know anybody that says, my favorite mission in life is to take the trash out. Okay, that's, that has to be done in a church too. So I want to encourage you, yes, everybody can have a take the trash out kind of job, but if we don't find them a job that means something to them, that's fulfilling in their placement, and again, I suggest that we all take time taking the trash out. Because when the meeting's all over, if we say, well, that's the server's job, that's not exactly right. Because whether maybe I'm hardwired as a prophet, exhorter, and administrator, but my hands can still serve. Do you see what I'm saying? So we can all share the load of serving, but the servers are going to take charge of that serving activity in a different way. Okay, does that make sense to you? So when you're doing placement, don't get so hung up on the need you have in the church, because if you will keep the person in front of you as the most important thing, you will be able to place them better. And in the long run, it's better for your church. So sometimes I'll look at a person and say, okay, here's where I have a need right now. And I was wondering if you could serve in this role for 3 months. And during those 3 months, let's evaluate your gifting, since you're not sure where you really want to be. Let's take these 3 months, and in these 3 months, could you serve there? And guess what I'm going to find out in that 3 months? I'm going to find out how well that job worked for them. I'm going to find out their passion. I'm going to find out their gifting. So for a short period of time, anybody can do anything. Then I also say to people, hey, I have this need every week, and I know it's not within your gifting. Can you take care of this every week? It's a simple little thing. It's just part of being part of the fam. You see what I'm saying? Everybody's part of the fam. Nobody's called, nobody feels like cleaning toilets is my mission in life. You see what I'm saying? But the toilets have to be cleaned, and the trash has to be taken out. So we all pitch in for those things that are not the fun things, but if you make somebody that's their only role, that they never really do what is impassioned in their life, then they'll be missing it. So placement, you want to try to place them in that area. What is their understanding of the team vision? When you are placing somebody on your team, what is their understanding of the team vision? Because otherwise, they're like confused. They're confused as to, why did you invite me to be part of this team? I thought this. Interview them carefully to make sure they understand what the team vision is. Because yes, they may understand the overall vision of the church. They've been in the church a long time, but now this little team that you've asked them to be on, do they know what the goals and the mission of that team is? Do they understand what they've just signed up for? Because if they don't, then you're going to find them complaining or feeling frustrated. So give them a job description, something that's so important to them. Give them a job description. Try to write out your assignments for them. And if you don't have them all written out, you don't need to go home and spend hours and hours writing out job descriptions for everything. Just as you're appointing new team members, just think, okay, I'm building a team right now. And I really probably should be careful to make sure I know what everybody's doing on that team so that I have decided and everybody is clear about their roles and responsibilities. So I found out one of the great ways to write a job description, if you want to go backwards in life, and this is actually going backwards is kind of fun, and you take your team and you say to them, would you write your job description as you understand it? You will get some very interesting things. You go, I did not know you thought you were responsible for that. And you'll find that people are saying, I'm responsible for one of my job descriptions. What's important for me on this team is that I do X, Y, Z. You go, I never even thought that. I thought you were doing ABC. And now you understand why that team member just seemed like they were like never quite connecting, because they were doing X, Y, Z where you thought they were doing ABC. Does that make sense? So if you help them and even ask them, after a season of time, somebody's job will morph into something different. So help them to evaluate along the way, what are you doing and what are you feeling responsible for? And then sit down and say, well, that's really nice, but here's where I really need you to go. Could you take this on? And rewrite their job description if you need to, or accept the job description the way it was written. Now, gift mix within the team. Let's talk about that for just a minute in placement of a team. If you understand the 7 gifts in Romans, you understand, for instance, that there's a perceiver or prophet in that gift mix. That prophet is black and white. They are admit it and quit it. That's how I am hardwired. It is, they don't understand that gray exists. But if you have a mercy person that you're interviewing for the team, they live in gray. Okay? So my question is, have we populated our team with all mercy or all prophet? And if we did populate our team with all mercy or all prophet, let's talk about an all mercy team. I don't know, like, have you ever gone to a restaurant with, my husband's a mercy, so I can laugh about this. We get in the car, and I'm like, decisive. Let's go to this restaurant. I don't know, have you ever thought about, have you ever heard about, somebody said this restaurant was really good. If you have an all mercy or all compassionate team, they're not going to make any decisions because they're not hardwired to make decisions. That's not their gifting. Right? So if you could understand some of these things, you might populate your teams with a mixture of people to be able to get things done. Well, on the other hand, if you have all prophets, whoa, hello, they might be bossing. Who are they going to boss around then? They don't have anybody boss around. If you have all prophets, are they just claiming the truth and speaking truth, but they're not really getting anything done? So we want to have all kinds of people. I would suggest to you that if you could spend some time watching these video series that I've told you about, then you will be able to understand a little bit more about Romans 12, and you might understand better about how to populate a team in the best possible way, and thinking, okay, I want to have a well balance of the gift mix on my team. So that's one thing. The second thing about your team is emotional intelligence. Whoa, this is quite a conversation, okay? So you have a team member, and have you ever noticed that somebody says, I'll be on your team, and you know right away that means that you're counseling them? Why are they wanting to be on your team? Because their emotional need is to be close to you. So understand that and recognize that. If that's the case, it may not be the best team for that person to be on. You may need to own up to this situation and help the person get a counselor. On the other hand, maybe this is a great opportunity, but do know that before you go into this, because how frustrating is that if you're the team leader and all of a sudden everybody on your team has a low emotional intelligence and they're high in need emotionally. You're not getting anything done on your team, and I'm not saying you shouldn't put these people on team. I'm just saying as a team leader, and even for their sake, understand what you've put them to do, because you can have a strong leader because you're, for instance, prophets, exhorters, teachers, administrators. These are strong leadership gifts, okay? However, if you have somebody in those 4 categories that is wounded, that is hurting, that has not worked through their issues, Well, I want to tell you that those people, if you place them in a leadership role, you've got problems. You need to make sure people work through their issues, especially if you're making them team leaders. And then you need to recognize, well, if somebody has emotional issues and they're on your team, then you certainly, this is again why we think it's healthier to do two things in two. And we try to pair up, especially if we have somebody that's a little more in need and a little less in need, then sometimes the two of those can go to Costco together, and the one is going to bring the other up. Isn't that right? So work within that and help yourself by understanding, of course we have hurting people in our church, and they should be put on our teams. But we need to recognize that and help them and speak to them privately and help, and not let, I always say this, leave your drama to your mama, okay? And I don't need your drama on my team. So right here, right now, in our team, if you're going to bring drama into the team, I'm going to ask you to step down. Example, we had a extremely creative, very gifted and talented musician, musical writer. He didn't write songs with words, but he wrote the music, like highly gifted. And he could run sound, and he could play any instrument, but we could see his emotional need was pretty high. And he was causing drama on the team. And I already told you we needed help, right? So we made the brave statement, and we said to him, you need to step off team for 3 months. You need to just go to church. You can't do it without me. You need me. I'm like, I think that proves that we need to do it without you. And what you can imagine the drama and the anger and the frustration, but we did not want that spirit on our team, right? That there's a superstar, right? I'm saying, and we have some very gifted musicians, very gifted vocalists in our church, but there is not a superstar mentality. Why? Because we took the hard road and we said, sit down. And he said, well, I might quit the church. You might have to. It's okay. We would release you, but we cannot release this spirit into our church. Okay? That's taking the high road and saying, more important is the overall good of the church. More important is the overall good of the team, because your emotional intelligence is causing drama that is unnecessary. Okay? So we have to take the high road. Fortunately, after 3 months, he pulled his attitude together and came back on team. Okay, so listen, I want to tell you that we oftentimes do not take the high road with people because we're more interested in putting a feather in our cap, right? We're more interested in telling everybody, I've got a great team. Really? I see your team is in real distress here, folks. You better sit down and think about that team, because if you've got emotional drama going on in your team, you need to stop right now, deal with the emotional drama, and maybe even take some team players out and have them sit, because maybe it's not their season to be serving on that team right now. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so it's very important to have an emotional intelligence conversation. Then, on placement, you want to have a discipleship conversation. For our church, it is critical to us that any leader, every leader goes through a certain level of discipleship in our church. Okay, so I'm not going to explain that all to you, but you must decide, is there a level of discipleship that your leaders must be in? Is there some sort of standard that it's easy for you to say? Now, in Foursquare, for instance, I think the handbook says that people have to wait 6 months before they serve with your children. That's a pretty good idea, don't you think? That's actually the handbook of the Foursquare Church. So that's even a regulation that we have to do by legal measures. Does that make sense to you? So when you're placing a person, remember to think, even if they are the most gifted and most seasoned person that you know, and you may have times where you override this decision because we try to make guidelines and not rules. Okay, and yes, there are opportunities and people by which that we override it. But is there a level that we wish everyone in our church would get to so that they could lead a team? I'm just talking about leading a team. The same question asks for people that are going to be on a team. Is there anything There may not be. You may say, no, we've evaluated this, and no, you can be on a team at our church and you don't have to do anything. Now, the way we've answered this question is we have volunteers that, honestly, a volunteer we have a lot of roles for volunteers that are very simple and very easy for them to do. Doesn't require a lot of commitment because it gets them in the door really easy, because we want to get people serving right away alongside with seasoned members, because that's part of their discipleship process. However, once you want to join a team, we ask you to go through our DNA class. That's a simple thing. It's 3 weeks. It's not real hard. We ask you to complete the DNA class so that you can be a part of what we're doing and you can understand why. Because remember the conversation earlier today? We want the core values of our church to be taught to everybody. So DNA is one of our training tools for everyone, and everyone gets the story of the church. They get the core values of the church. They get the information they need, and it's the same for everybody. And they get hands laid on them in the 3rd week to impart to them and to release them into ministry in the church. That's an entry gate level for every person in our church. So we also ask our team leaders to have gone through several of our discipleship classes that are identified for them so that they can get through a certain amount of things that we want them to know if they're going to lead a team. We want to know that you've grasped these concepts if you're going to lead a team. If you haven't done that, then we need you to do that for us. Okay? So we have a pastor that we've known years and years and years and years, and they've recently joined our church about, I want to say, a year or so ago. And I've known them forever, literally 35 years I've known them. Okay? And we've been in ministry with these people before. They've come to our church. Do we override our system or not? Well, because they're seasoned leaders, they said, no, don't override the system. Let us go through your system. Because we knew them, we could have overridden the system. We knew that they would be good. We knew that they would be, but they said, no. Get us in the first DNA class that's possible. Get us in your first level of discipleship that's possible. We want this so that we can know exactly what's going on in this church. Okay? So you kind of know who you're dealing with. All of a sudden you go, I have a spectacular leader here, right? Okay, so it's very important that you think through when you do that. Now, let's talk about motivation. How each leader can and should motivate people in ministry under their leadership. Motivation is a big conversation. Your personal behavior is part of your motivation. Your personal behavior is part of your motivation. When you throw a temper tantrum, when you roll your eyes, maybe you're with some of your leaders of your team and you're talking about that person, that person with the lower emotional intelligence comes in the room and they throw a little drama and you all of a sudden, can't believe that. And you let those words out of your mouth. You let that body language out. What did you just tell your team leaders? You just told them they are not safe. You just told them my motivation was my job and not that person. My motivation was the assignment and not God's people. These are critical matters, and you wonder why we can't build teams. Because we shrug our shoulders. We call people flakes. That's a horrible thing to call a person. Do you see what I'm saying? We don't talk about God's people, God's treasure. Remember, these people that come into our church are God's special treasure, his daily delight. Do you know what I'm saying? These are God's special treasure, his daily delight, the people that he wakes up for every day. I call them his pumpkin spice latte. And if I can look at the people that are on my team as God's pumpkin spice latte, can you tell I like these? Wouldn't I treat them differently? Wouldn't my motivation be more about them than it is even about my task? Yes, I have an important task. I am planting an extension campus right now. And it's a big job. I have a lot of responsibility on my shoulders. But I never want to lose contact with the idea that the people that are serving in my world are God's special treasure. God's pumpkin spice latte. I don't want to lose sight of that, because if I do, I've lost my motivation, and my motivation becomes about the church plant instead of about God's people. The church plant is my motivation, but when I'm talking about a team, now all of a sudden my motivation is his people. Yes, I have good intention with the church plant, but it can never override the people. Does that make sense? That doesn't mean you become dysfunctional. It just means that you keep in check your personal behavior. Your motivation is also indicated in your communications and clear expressions. Here's what I say. If you have a motivation that is unhealthy, it will leak. So the best way to have the right motivation, I'm going to tell you, is like astounding what I'm about to tell you. The best way to have the right motivation is to have the right motivation. See, we want to make it be, I'll have the right motivation, it'll come clear. It will not come clear in any of your communications or expressions if you have the wrong motivation. So the only thing you can do is go to God and say, create in me a clean heart. Oh God, restore unto me the joy of my salvation. Do you see what I'm saying? I have to have the right motivation. When I'm placing a person, I cannot look at what they can do for me, but what I can do for them. I must look at them as God's pumpkin spice latte. I have to look at the people that God sends to me and say, yes, I have a great motivation to get my church plant done. I have a good motivation and it's healthy. And I'm clear about that I am impassioned about that. And I'm inviting you to be on this team because I can see that when we plant this church, we're going to reach thousands more for Jesus. That's a healthy motivation. But the minute I see myself, example, have a woman who just recently was on my team and she ended up going through a divorce situation. She did a lot for me. I can't even tell you. I don't know. When I heard this news, I was like, what am I going to do? Because that woman was there, like Johnny on the spot. But I sat her down and I said, for the good of your family, and not because I'm shamed at your decision, but for the good of your family, you need to focus on your family right now. And it's not that you can't serve, but you need to serve at a different level. Because it is not healthy for you. Your family needs you right now. So I need to release you. What did she know when I did that? That I cared about her more than whether she filled a slot for me as a missionary, because she's actually was a missionary. We have a system in our church for our church planting. You'll like this, where the people of our founding campus become missionaries to the second campus or the third campus, and they serve a term, or they serve a Sunday, or they serve for an event, and they become missionaries. They don't relocate from one campus to the other. They simply stay part of that campus, and they become a missionary to the other one, serving alongside. So we have about 75 to 100 missionaries that have engaged in our church plant since we started it, and we started in a front room of somebody's home in 2012, and we just kicked off our launch in February, and our goal was to have the missionaries, and it still is, the missionaries do the serving up front. Why? Because what do they know? They know the core values. They know the diamond standards. They know everything about us. So they're doing the ministry up front and modeling it, right? And then they're taking the new disciples alongside, and they serve together for a season. And now we're entering the season where the missionaries are disappearing and the disciples in the new location are taking over the ministry. Does that make sense? Okay. But again, this woman was a missionary, held a huge responsibility for me. She was actually overseeing all of our missionaries from the founding campus. It was like, whoa, this means I have to do that now. Or I have to raise up another person to help me with that. Does that make sense? But could I not see that her need was greater than mine? You see what I'm saying? If you have the wrong motivation, it will leak. your motivation will come in volunteer appreciation. I would love to tell you that we have this fantastic volunteer appreciation gathering once a year, twice a year, 4 times a year, and all our volunteers are loved and cared for in this beautiful event that becomes a huge work event for everybody involved, including the volunteers. I can never figure out how you have a volunteer appreciation dinner without making the volunteers do the work, right? I can't figure that out, so we don't do that. I want to do it. I'm not saying we don't. We just haven't figured it out yet. But you know what I know? As I've created a culture of volunteer appreciation. I greatly appreciate you. Thank you so much. Personally walk across the room. I can't tell you how many times I've picked up the phone on a Sunday on the way home from my campus ministry over to my home that's still an hour away. And I call several of my leaders telling them on the phone, what a great job you did this morning. I can't tell you how many times in public where I'm not talking about just from the platform, though I have the platform to use and I will use it to appreciate my volunteers. But I can't tell you how many times I've just been by the coffee bar and there's been 2 or 3 people and I stood there for a moment and I bragged on one of our volunteers. They didn't expect it, they didn't see it coming, but I can tell you that those things were probably more important than a banquet where they got a little trophy. Because they got some words of expression and some genuine heartfelt appreciation. If your motivation isn't appreciative, they will know it and it will leak. If your motivation is just to get the job done, then they will sense that. I'm telling you, your motivation is huge. And your motivation will be found in feedback and debrief. It's very important. Also, how you motivate people. You have talk about motivation. The conversation of motivation talks about your personal motivation about them, but now how do you motivate them to do something? You see, that word can go both ways. So in the conversation about motivation, you want to say, how do I motivate people? How do I encourage people to do their job? I give them feedback and I debrief them. And I help them to understand this was a great thing, but I think we could have gone over here if we'd gone this way. And you take ownership for some of those things. Now, those were things that we talk about in team building that we've talked about somewhat this morning, but I gave you a little more pieces on them. Remember, team building is what you personally do. Now we're going to talk about our church and team mobilization, which are church processes that you want to consider that assist the overall process of people serving in the church. These are church processes that you might want to consider that would assist the overall process of people serving in the church. Now I want to tell you my story. Some years ago, I was the senior pastor of the church, and I walked in. We had 2 services, and I walked in, and there was one of our newer members, and she was sitting at the cafe table with a stack of papers. I said, "What are you doing?" So I'm filling out an application for ministry. I'm so excited. I went to church, came back out. She was still sitting there, and I thought, she must have gotten sidetracked. So then I went to the second service. I came out. She was still sitting there. I said, "Martina, what are you doing?" "I'm filling out the paperwork for application at the church." "Can I see that?" "Oh, we had a book." Oh, my goodness. Because every department in our church had a moral integrity statement. By the way, they weren't all the same. Hello. Every department had an application, and every single piece of paper had her name, her address, her email, her phone number, and she was filling them all out because she was obedient and wanted to be part of the team. How frustrating was that? We made it hard, but there are things that we need to know. But do I need her name and address and phone number on every single piece of paper? Do I need 7 different moral integrity statements that don't even match? We have to have an application process. Now, for Grace North Church, we have moved to an online application process. If you would like to see our online application process, if you will email me, I will send you the online application process. My email is on the paper that you have. And I will send you that. You can actually walk through the process, and then I'll take you out of our system after you've done it. Just so if you want to walk through and see it, because you'd have to complete each segment. It's 10 pages long. It takes about, I did it last night just to see it. It took me about less than 10 minutes to do it. Wasn't 2 hours that Sweet Martina was doing, okay? It was probably more than 2 hours that she was spending. We sat down that week because as senior pastor, I immediately saw, oh my goodness, we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. oh my goodness, what have I done to our church? And I hadn't seen this problem. So I sat down, and it took us a couple of weeks to pull together everything that was being sent out. And I said, this is the day it's done. Nobody makes any application for ministry in my church without going through this process. So what we came up with, and I'm going to share with you right now, we are now online. So that has changed for us. This is very new. We are now, our complete application is online. But everything that I'm going to tell you right now is part of the online application. We created, and this is if you have to do paper, this is a great system that you can use. We bought white envelopes, big, white envelopes that just open up, and they were printable on our printer, so that it wasn't something that had to go to a Kinko's or something to be printed. We just ran them right through. We created a front of the envelope that had the name, the address, the phone number one time, right? They're only filling that. So the outside of the envelope had everything that you needed on it. Unfortunately, I forgot it for this meeting. So everything you needed is on that envelope on the outside. On the inside, every piece of paper on the inside was approved by the application process team, so that now we know that we do not have a million different of the same thing, okay? And we didn't ask inappropriate questions. Some of them were actually inappropriate questions that shouldn't have been asked. And some of them weren't asking appropriate questions that should have been asked, okay? So because we are a family-based church, so we actually run a huge process for anybody that serves in our church in the application area. Why? Because in our ministry, children are found serving in multiplicity of areas. Okay, so we just kind of think that everybody's applying for children's ministry. It's kind of the way we do it, okay? That's the way we run it, because we have kids all over everywhere. So we don't take any chances. We run full background checks on everyone. So inside the envelope are what I'm about to share with you, the different pieces of the envelope that were inside the envelope and now part of our online application. So we have the general information envelope. Then we have a background authorization form. Now, I'm going to just say to you that in our litigious society, you do need to have an authorization. You cannot, first of all, we can't even run it without getting their Social Security, and you know what that could be like, getting their Social Security. And the question is, are you being safe? Do you care enough about these people to be safe? Well, we were still doing the paperwork. What we would do is we would take the background authorization form, we would run the authorization, and then we would black out their Social Security number and keep the authorization with their signature for legal record. But we did not want to keep their Social Security. We do not keep Social Security numbers for our members in file. Okay? So we then created one moral integrity statement that we worked with a counselor. So if you follow our online statement, you will see that moral integrity statement was very vetted out and very processed. One moral integrity. Why is that important? Well, it's important to us. And honestly, if I don't ask them to keep some set of standard, then all of a sudden I'm going to have a leader that says, well, I didn't know that you didn't want me sleeping with my boyfriend. I'm sorry. I didn't get that was part of your requirement. That's not. Sorry, can you please step down from ministry for a season? Do you see what I'm saying? So we've got this. Then we had a ministry commitment form. And it's not a ministry where we had before that Martina was working with. She had, I think there was probably 7 different ministry commitment forms, one for every department of the church at that given time. Each department had said, I want you to commit to this. And it was all over the board. Why don't we have one? Because systemically, we don't want to see anybody sitting there for 3 or 4 hours filling out a piece of paper, right? We don't want that to happen. But we do want to know that they're committed to the ministry. And again, follow me. Remember, it's okay to have a ministry commitment form, and actually, I recommend it. I recommend this is a great tool to use, that you've actually had them sign a ministry commitment form. And that is very important. But it's one for our whole church. The worship department doesn't create a different ministry commitment form than the children's ministry. So now we have a common thing that's happening throughout our church. Can you see how much healthier that is? A personal history statement. Now, if you go online, you will see our personal history statement. You will see that it is asking some important questions, and you can take it or leave it. We felt it was important, and legally we felt we could ask these questions. And we may give them a complete out. If you don't want to answer these questions, or you want to answer them to a pastor in person, that is totally fine. But again, if you don't know where they're coming from, I'm not sure how you're going to deal with the idea of emotional intelligence, where sometimes we're just missing something because we didn't even know what their personal history was. An information release form, because we have every member, we have cameras everywhere at our church taking pictures, doing videos, and we know we can't capture everyone, but at least all of our core team members, anybody that's applying for ministry, we'd go ahead and take this moment to get an information and photo release, and they release to us the pictures and anything that we would have. Then personal references, and guess what we do? We call the personal references. Isn't that a good idea? So if you're going to ask for personal references, you might as well call them and get a little bit of a story from somebody. Then we have ministry-specific portion of the application. In other words, if you are going to apply for ministry in the worship team, then guess what? It's nice to know whether you play a saxophone or whether you play a guitar, right? So there's just some information that we're asking, but we're not asking everybody, so that sheet can be take it or leave it. If you're planning to apply for ministry in the worship team, then these are some questions you need to answer regarding them. Does that make sense to you? So you may have some ministry specific, but again, they're not asking for their name, address, and phone number and email all over again, just a name on the top of the paper, or in our case on the online, we've only asked for their name once. And ministry specific things. And then ministry areas of interest. If you haven't identified the areas that people can serve in your church, then they may still not be able to get through your system. Making the application will just become a frustration to them. Because the last thing in the world you want to do is somebody to apply for ministry in your church and then you have no response to that. So you really need to, and I encourage you to help them by responding to that. And again, we've moved all of this to an online situation. A second part of your system that you might consider is consistent vocabulary for titles. For instance, do you have team member and team leader, or do you call them pastoral leaders? Or what do you call people in your church, and what does that mean, and what does that look like to you? So you might want to take some time to figure out what the different areas of ministry look like and what does that mean, because overall they are going to begin to develop what that language is if you don't develop it for them. Because what will happen is they'll go, oh, I understand what that is. That director, everybody that's a director. Well, you have some people being called directors, some people being called team leader. What are they, directors or team leaders? So make a difference and just decide what you're going to call them in your church and be consistent with that and teach that to your teams. It's very helpful to them. Another area to talk about in your systems is team mobilization software. There is great software out there, and we personally use Church Community Builders, also known as CCB. One thing I want to say to you is if you purchase software, train yourself well on it and don't use 10% of it when you could have used 100% of it, okay? Because it takes a lot of work to engage your church in a software program, in some sort of program that will help your church. We did a lot of research, and there are programs that will help your church, and I'm going to give you the 3 types of programs to look for. And it just depends on what you need in your church. There are some programs that are very accounting-oriented, so they help you with accounting. Then there are some programs that are very network-oriented. They help you become a little mini Facebook in your church. We didn't want either one of those. We went right down the middle. And we said, we need one that will help us with our accounting, but not become our accounting. So we have all of our online giving goes through this. And yet we didn't really feel like we needed a new Facebook system, and we couldn't compete with Facebook. But we did need some online help. So we came up with Church Community Builders after looking at their software and all of their program and everything that they do. And I say software, it's not really software. It's an online, complete online internet integrated program. And but again, I want to encourage you, if you can't afford that, that's okay. Then just at least figure out what you are doing and log in your people somehow. There are things you can use. You can use Google. Google has shared documents. Google shared documents is an amazing thing. There's a lot of things you can do that don't cost any money. But I can tell you that it's been helpful to us. One of the things I would encourage you in your church is look for data silos. Look for data silos because you're frustrating your volunteers because here's what happens. They're on a team, and that team leader was given their new address. We just moved down 2 blocks over, and we're no longer on Orange Throat Road, but now we're on Anaheim Drive, okay? We've moved. I gave you the information, and you put it in your little system, in your personal data book, but the rest of the church didn't get it. Now, they thought you were the leader of the church, and they gave it to you, and they're frustrated because they gave you the information. And who's at fault here? Because you data siloed it into your world, but the rest of the church didn't get it. And this is why we like the online system, because now everybody uses the online system, and we know where the correct information is found, okay? And the people have access to their information as well and can update it themselves. And they can add pictures, and it's just a great program. So we're very, very pleased with it. We've been with this company for several years. And so, again, it's not intended to be an advertisement for them, but I do think it helps. And again, I think that what we find in church life is we find that we are savvy enough with computers that what we can create is a nightmare that actually hurts our church because we have so many different systems and we haven't stuck to one system. And I can tell you that it was like pulling teeth when we said we're quitting all data silos. But I have this one thing that I want to put information in. Not approved anymore. But I use this one, not approved anymore. We're using one system so that we can best serve our people. And now you may come up with several systems you want to use. That's fine. I'm just saying question yourself in whatever system you use and look at your whole church and see, for instance, we were using a software program. We had 7 different systems, 7 different places where a person's address and name could be held. It was frightening. They could have gone through the accounting, and the accounting team had in the QuickBooks, that's where they were keeping their addresses and names. Then they could have gone through our data system. They could have gone through Constant Contact, where we had a whole different thing. Then each team leader had their own system. We were keeping it in our Google address book. Well, that's nice. That's your personal address book, but that's not the church address book. Do you see what I'm saying? So the question is, are we best serving our people in our system? So in a good data system, a good people-moving system, you're going to have the ability to know where your people are serving, log in their gifts. You're going to have some privacy on their giving, of course, so that nobody can see their giving, but the accountants can see it. But it's all kept in one place so they can see it. You're going to be able to put them in groups that the groups can communicate with online, and it is very helpful to your teams. But it is going to take some work if you're not already in this idea, because it really takes some stick-to-itiveness to really get it to going. Now, orientation and training, I'm going to give you, we've already talked about training, but I want to talk to you real quick about some things that you would want to add to your orientation and training. Make sure that these are in there for your training, that you train people on your vision, mission, and values of your church. Now, again, that means you have to have a vision, mission, and values for your church. Okay? So train your people on that. Provide this information for them, but honestly, if you're still having to look it up, it's probably not your vision, mission, or values. It's got to be right here for you. Do you see what I'm saying? It's got to be right here. And you might want to readdress that. But make sure your people know it, but that means you have to know it. Second thing is your diamond standards of behavior. We use these words. Now, you might want to use other words. But what is the acceptable behavior in the church? In other words, we teach our diamond standards of behavior. I'll give you a quick rundown on this. We believe the diamond standards of behavior are the roots, and the actions that come out are the fruits. Okay? So the diamond standards of behavior are the roots of honor, for instance. How that comes out as behavior can be different for every person, so it doesn't become a rule. For instance, one of our core values is excellence of effort. That's a diamond standard root, excellence of effort. Well, do we make a rule that every time you leave a table, you must clean up your table? No, but does that happen commonly? Yes. An excellence of effort means that, gee, when I leave the table, I'll push the chair in, I'll clear off the table, I'll make sure my trash is gone. But we didn't make a rule that they had to clear off the table, right? We made a standard of excellence. And we began to talk about the standard of excellence. They began to put the standard of excellence. And honestly, if you do it like this, you're going to have a lot better standard of excellence. So then our people, they're so great because they'll say, oh, Pastor Marion, we can't do that. That does not a diamond standard. And I'm like, okay, tell me what you want for a diamond standard here. Oh, and then they'll just begin to explain, well, because diamond standard excellence of effort, this is what we're going to do. Or diamond standard is courage, so we're going to take the hard road. So do you see what I'm saying? And then they begin to say, I need to add courage here because that's a core value. All right. Another one is financial standards. Include this in your orientation. And another one would be discipleship levels for leaders. Include this in your orientation so that it's not misunderstood, that they can understand it. And then the last one is a gift assessment. So if you need help with the gift assessment, feel free to contact me. But again, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it would be helpful if you understood how the people were hardwired. One last area I want to cover, and then we're going to do some group reflections. Retaining volunteers as a church. In your systems as a church, you might ask yourself, is there something we can do as a church family to help retain volunteers? I will just give you an example of something that has been extremely helpful to us. Not only for our staff, who are volunteers, but for our volunteers who are not staff. We have decided that we found out that we could get a tremendous amount of people to join our weekday teams if we will provide childcare. So, because what was happening is we had a lot of people, men and women, that could do something during the week, but they couldn't because they couldn't afford the childcare. So to serve at the church cost them money, or their kids were running around unsupervised, which was neither one was acceptable. So we placed in our budget money to pay for childcare. So every Wednesday and Thursday, our teams that work on property, their children are cared for by a professional team of people that we do pay for them. Now, you may not have the money for that, but again, you might think of a system that works for your church. Again, look at the barriers and don't see them as roadblocks. See them as something you can overcome. We began to see that our church had a lot of young families that wanted to serve but couldn't serve because there was no way for them to work out their child care system. So we solved the problem for them, and we have full teams. On Wednesday and Thursday, it's full. The other thing we found out is that, everybody gets hungry around noon on Wednesday and Thursday. So we buddy up, and everybody brings meals, and we share the meals in this, okay? So again, what can you do to make the environment absolutely delightful and fun? Okay, because we decided we wanted the environment around our church to be fun. We wanted to be speaking loudly of care. And people love to be at our church. They do. They just love to be there. It is fun to be at Grace North. And so the volunteers come like out of the woodwork because they like to be there because we've made an atmosphere that says fun, that says enjoyable, that says, yes, let's be here, okay? So this is really important. The last thing, and then we're going to break up. I told you that was the last thing, but here it really is the last thing. And I believe I left this off of this morning's conversation, was empowered for table service. I think at lunch break, some of you might have noticed that number 6 on your sheet, I did not talk you through this. We did talk about humility, but you know that in Acts chapter 6 that Stephen, the apostles come together and they pull together and they say, we need to be doing the preaching and the ministry, and we need some people to be empowered for table service. And we know then that Stephen, who was one of these men who became a table servant, ended up becoming a martyr for Jesus. And I think that we take too lightly the work of the ministry. I think that oftentimes we're afraid to really say, I'm empowering you to serve. And it may feel like table service, but in the end of the day, you'll be giving your life for Jesus. And I want to encourage you to think of the work of the ministry as vitally important. I want you to go and read Acts chapter 6. I want you to think of what it had to look like when the men of the day said, we're going to push ourselves aside to attend to the word, the ministry of the word. And in doing that, I need somebody to serve the tables to the widows, and I need somebody to do table service. And Stephen is appointed, and in the end of the day, gives his life. The work of the ministry is so important. We are doing the King's business. And we never want to discount this.